I'm Stephanie, and you may have seen some of my other YouTube videos. I'm working on a new series with my daughter Sydney for her to express some of the anxiety and how autism affected her when she was in school. The later part of this segment, she's going to read to you her first book that she authored, Jessie and Cleo Bear Tales. And I wanted to take this moment to kind of set this up so that you understood where she was coming from when she was 5 and a half and she wrote this little book about what school was like for her. I want to speak to the moms and dads. It's easy to think that, oh, this is Stephanie, the autism specialist, giving us all of this advice. But when my daughter was 3, 4, and 5 years old and being expelled from school, I was not Stephanie, the certified autism spectrum. I was Stephanie, the mom, trying to figure out why her precocious little 2 and 3-year-old and 4-year-old kept getting kicked out of schools or asked not to re-enroll for the next year. So I was sharing the same place as many of you are, seeing things that aren't quite adding up, wondering about the developmental milestones, getting mixed information from professionals at the time, which has led me into my specialty now, being a mental health provider that works pretty much solely with autism families or special needs families. So I want to set the stage of what you're going to hear in this book. So again, moms, dads, if you're feeling guilty because your child was diagnosed later in life, or you didn't see the signs, or educators, you didn't see the signs, sometimes with what we used to call high-functioning autism or Asperger's, ASD level 1 and 2, it is very difficult to sometimes see the autism because developmentally for children, we may see the secondary or comorbid issue first. We may see the anxiety that is there. We may see ADHD because there's hyperactivity or lack of focus. Or we may see oppositional defiant behavior because there's kicking, hitting, spitting, or eloping, or things of that nature. So sometimes in childhood, those will be the things that tend to manifest first, that schools and parents will tend to want to focus on because these are visible things that are maybe disrupting family life or disrupting the school. But I want to just again tell you kind of what was going on, because when you also hear this book, you think there's no way a 5-and-a-half-year-old wrote this. So again, let's just kind of go back through Sydney's history. She had been, by the time she wrote this book, she had been asked to leave 2 schools. She'd been asked to leave a preschool setting, and she had been asked to leave a kindergarten. So I was in school in the 1990s for both my bachelor's and my master's degree. It was in the 90s that the DSM-4 and the DSM-4TR are the diagnostic manuals that were being used in abnormal psychology, developmental psychology, in going through the different labels of the diagnostic categories. So my professor told me back in the 1990s that this condition, this Asperger's, they felt it was something like autism or on the autism spectrum. It was maybe even referred to sometimes as high-functioning autism, which we don't refer to that anymore. And he said that the diagnosis rate was 1 in 10,000. He told us as young counselors, we will never see this in counseling. This isn't for you to know for therapeutic purposes, because many people with Asperger's will just simply lack the introspection and they won't be capable of doing talk therapy. It was introduced to us because it was a brand new diagnosis into the DSM, and they felt we needed to know it for being able to make differential diagnosis. So also during that time, the autism spectrum wasn't really known very much about. We really only had one movie made in the late 80s, the Rain Man, which pretty much introduced most of us to what autism was, but it also had some stereotypes in there that are not necessarily true for all persons on the spectrum. So in becoming a mom, all I knew was Rain Man and the DSM, having heard the term Asperger's one time. And since I wasn't supposedly going to see it in my life or see it in counseling, it was kind of filed away for future reference. So I didn't hear that term again until my daughter would be diagnosed in 2004, 2005. But let's go back to when Sydney was a toddler. Because when you hear this book, you might think there's just not a way that a 5-and-a-half-year-old wrote this book. So going back to when Sydney was about 2, 3 years old, when she was at the pediatrician having one of her wellness checkups, the pediatrician said that since she sees many children, she felt that Sydney was developmentally not only on par, but was exceeding developmental milestones, that she felt that Sydney needed to be in some kind of preschool that would foster her learning. Sydney loved to learn colors, shapes, patterns, We were already doing some reading and letter recognition and numbers. Everywhere we traveled in the car, what does that sign say, and naming the color or naming a letter on the sign. So she was very just curious, often precocious 2 and 3-year-old. So the pediatrician suggested that I have her tested. And so when she went to a psychologist for testing, the testing did come back that her developmental milestones and her intelligence, so to speak, was at least 1 to 2 standard deviations above the mean. So we went ahead and put her in a preschool type setting, but the other students, were developmentally on task. But the teachers would continue to tell me, this is the only 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old that's ever known our name, that speaks in full sentences and tries to interact with the other students, through vocabulary, but they're still not at that place speaking. In fact, one of my favorite stories was when the second part of the year, when she was in preschool, when she was 2, was the year she led the mattress revolt. And because she was the only student in her class that could speak, she could often get kids to do things, kind of follow her like a Pied Piper. Sydney always had difficulty with naps and sleeping, and it was not her favorite time. Well, one day she had decided she had had it with the naps. And not only was she not going to nap, but the rest of the class was not going to nap either. So they had cribs, and they put all the children in the cribs, and they have to sleep for 45 minutes to an hour. The teachers left, and Sydney told everyone to rip the sheets off their mattresses and to throw them overboard, and was chanting, "No nap, no nap." And the rest of the students were just grunting and making noises when the teachers came in, and she had staged a nap revolt. That was the first time that I had to start picking her up early from school, because we couldn't have this kind of disruption during the nap time process. So the next year, she had a fabulous teacher who realized in her 3-year-old class that there was no way she was going to take a nap or be still for an hour and a half period. What this teacher did, she kind of figured out that Sydney was kind of high energy and needed to have these all this knowledge that she had put to good use. And she noticed that even at 3, Sydney could recognize all of the kids' names. She had memorized how they were spelled. She knew what book bags belonged to each student, what lunchbox belonged to each student, and even if their name was written on a paper, she knew whose paper it was because she had memorized that at 3. So the ingenious thing that the teacher did was she would have Sydney pretend to be asleep, and then let all the other students get to bed, and then she'd have her be quiet and come out in the hall, and she would have Sydney line up the lunch boxes down the hall, because the next thing that would happen would be that the parents would be coming to pick up their students, and everything would be by their little cubby in the hall. So Sydney's job would get to be to put all of the lunch boxes in. She'd also line up their little book bags, and then there was a bag where all of your sheets for the day would get put in, and the teacher would hand it to her, and then she'd look at the name and she'd match it. And so that would take about 45-50 minutes, and then she'd have to go in and kind of pretend to be asleep again, so that when the other students woke up, she would have been laying down too. This worked fabulously until about February, March of that school year. But sadly, the teacher was pregnant, and she had to go on maternity leave. When they replaced her with the new teacher who had been teaching 7th grade all of her life, she decided that Sydney could not have special privileges. The teacher tried to explain to her she's just high energy. If you keep her engaged, you won't have a problem. It's when she gets a little bored, you're going to have some issues, but keep her engaged, let her be your little helper. And she decided that wasn't fair. So according to what Sydney was thinking, here it is March, we've been doing this every day, this has been our routine, and the teacher wouldn't have it. So we started having some meltdowns, running out of the classroom, running to get the lunch boxes because that's what she thought she was supposed to be doing. So this was the first situation where we were asked that maybe this was not a good placement for her. So we looked into, I had her tested again, and just to see, was she still tracking, was she developmentally above or on track? And the psychologist again said this child really needs to be in Montessori or in some kind of structured setting for school. So when she was 3, she actually started transitional kindergarten, and the other students were 4 and 5. Now this was a brand new little Christian school, and they were just happy to have warm bodies. And I had made a deal with them that if she couldn't keep up, I would be happy to pull her from the class. If she wasn't ready for kindergarten, it would be perfectly fine to repeat transitional kindergarten. But within the first week, she was already at kindergarten reading level, so they went ahead and took a chance on her in transitional kindergarten. In transitional kindergarten, she had not any behavior problems. What I didn't find out until kindergarten, when we did start having problems, was that the TK program had 3 options: Monday through Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Sydney was the only student that was Monday through Friday, and the other 3 students were Tuesday, Thursday. This meant she got the teacher all to herself on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So this also meant that they were able to get through a lot of material, and she just thought it was fun to hang out one-on-one with Sydney, so she was reading almost at a 2nd grade level at the end of transitional kindergarten. So there was no problem in moving her up to kindergarten. We thought, this is great. This is a small school environment. There's like 5 or 6 kids in the classroom. For us, it was a Christian environment, so that was good. We had the same teacher from the year before in the same classroom. We thought, what could go wrong? Now, the only thing we had been noticing at home had been lining up of things, kind of a need for routine. She was a very picky eater. She was very opinionated as to what she wore, but it had to do more with sensory, the way that things felt on her body. So once we kind of figured all of that out, we really weren't having a lot of meltdown behaviors at home. It was more kind of anxiety, panic type behaviors. What became a disaster in kindergarten was Sydney no longer got the teacher one-on-one on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And for a whole year, she had had this teacher to herself Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The school also decided to combine TK and kindergarten together, which meant sometimes she would be teaching with the TK and then tell the kindergartners to kind of, here's some work, focus on this, and don't interrupt. That became a huge problem. It was during this time she began eloping from class, getting under her desk, refusing to come out. If she had something on her desk and somebody picked it up or moved something, she'd become very agitated. She was having a very difficult time moving from subject to subject, especially if she hadn't finished a paper or finished something that she was coloring, but because she was starting to get very meticulous in her coloring, and it had to be done perfectly. So we started having trouble with the school, and the school was a small Christian school, and they believed in corporal punishment. So I want to say that while corporal punishment has its place if done properly and used sparingly, it is never a good idea for kids on the spectrum. At this time, we did not know that Sydney was on the spectrum. So from her perspective, we were just hitting her or punishing her for no reason. So this also became a matter of trauma to be dealt with later. But the school wanted to use corporal punishment, and the school also would have very other punitive measures of really long timeouts and kind of shaming techniques that we were not, we didn't want to continue to happen. So in February of that year, that's how we get introduced to Bear Tales. She was very much interested. She wanted a Build-A-Bear more than anything in the world, and Build-A-Bears are very expensive. So what we decided to do for the month of February is that if she could go the entire month without getting in trouble at school one time, we would earn different pieces of the Build-A-Bear costume and then go build the Build-A-Bear. So like for the first week, if she didn't have any problems or incidences, we would earn the shirt. And then the next week, the pants. And then the next week, the little shoes. In the meantime, my dad was helping me with this reward system, and he was having a cousin of mine, whose name happened to be Jessie, to make these little tapes for her, pretending to be the bear. And I would give him information as to things that happened at school, and my cousin would make this little audio. Sydney, I can't wait to meet you. I heard you almost had a difficult time at school, but you really did a good job. I'm so proud of you. I can't wait to meet you when you build me and make me in the Build-A-Bear workshop. So we used this for the whole month of February, and at the time Toy Story was very popular, so the talking toys was not a new concept. So we used that for the month of February. She had no incidences. She was able to build the bear, which was Jessie, which you'll hear about, the purple tie-dyed bear, and we were going to kind of start using this. I was willing to buy as many Build-A-Bears as possible to get us through school. But instead of the teacher and the administrator kind of being excited that we had found a way to help motivate her, they chose to saw this as she was just being willingly disrespectful. That if she could hold it together, for 28 days in school, then she just must be willful disobedient. So they had initiated a 3-strike policy. So in the first week of March, she hit all 3 strikes in that same week and was expelled from kindergarten. Well, one of the projects that they had really been talking about in school, they had bought these little white books, and they were going to do an author night. And so they were going to take from March to May to write their little books, illustrate their books, and then they were going to have a meet the author night. Well, Sydney was super excited about that. And since I had to pay for all of March's tuition, even though she had been expelled, I insisted that I get my little blank book. And we would be doing homeschooling for the rest of the time. And pretty much this little book took us the rest of that time. So I want to introduce you to Bear Tales, and I want you to be just listening for a couple of things as she's telling you the story. You will hear how much she is afraid of school. You would hear that she would often pretend to be sick to get out of school. She felt like she couldn't make friends. Kids were teasing her for being different. She hated Duck, Duck, Goose with a passion, or any game of tag where you could be suddenly touched, especially if you were going to be touched on the head. She had major impulse control issues and began kicking, hitting, biting, spitting. She had major anxiety about school. She had low self-esteem, and she just couldn't seem to figure out these other kids. So Sydney wrote this book, and so it's written at I think what sounds like a 7 or 8 year old level. But these are the thoughts that she wanted us to understand what was going on for her. I've shared this book with a couple of people, and they say, Stephanie, this is a great book. She's so introspective, and she's sharing with you all of these feelings. And then some people say, well, because she's sharing her feelings, she can't possibly have autism. Well, I'd like you to remember that her mother is a therapist, and we were in homeschool, so we were doing a lot of theory of mind, a lot of exploring your feelings, and I had come across this book at a conference. This book is all of these little woodland animals that have problems with anxiety, fear, worry, sadness, and anger. So when you start to hear on about page 10, where we start talking about the what ifs, that's the part where we really can't publish the book because she had been listening to this book. And in this book, Bruce Moose had a really bad case of the what ifs. So what was exciting to me as the therapist and mom was that she was picking up on the book. She was picking up on the concepts of the book and incorporating that into her story. So that is why we cannot publish the book, because it does borrow a couple of pages from this other book. So with no further ado, I give you Sydney and Jessie and Chloe, Bear Tales, a story by Sydney Holmes.
Hi, my name is Sydney, and this is my book, Bear Tales. I dedicate this book to my family. My mommy, daddy, and Erica are special. Jessie and Cleo, written by Sydney Holmes, illustrated by Sydney Holmes. Meet Jessie. She is afraid to go to first grade. She is afraid the teacher and the kids won't like her. She does not like seat work. She doesn't like rest time. She is shy, she likes gymnastics, and mac and cheese. Meet Cleo. She likes school. She is full of energy all the time. She loves her teachers. She really likes snack time. She loves people, she loves gymnastics, and chocolate pie. It was a pretty day. Jessie, a purple bear, said, "I don't ever want to go to school." Cleo, a peach tie-dye bear, said, "You gotta go to school so you can learn." Mommy said, "Cleo is right. Everybody goes to school." The time for school came. Jessie was pretending to be sick. Something was bothering her. Jessie was afraid of the other bears not liking her. She was nervous and afraid. Cleo wanted to help Jessie not be afraid. Cleo said, "Jessie, you can do it!" Jessie felt better, but was still nervous. Jessie had a case of the what ifs. What if the kids don't like me? What if the teacher doesn't like me? What if nap time takes too long? What if I can't do the seat work? What if, what if? Cleo said, "You sure do have the what ifs." Jessie said, "What's that?" Cleo said, "They are imaginary creatures that can weigh a ton. They get really strong and they take your energy." Jessie decided she needed to let her what-ifs go. She was not nervous anymore. Jessie learned she had to tell herself the truth to beat those what-ifs. Another day, Jessie was angry. She did not want to go to school. Her mommy asked why. Jessie said, "I don't want the teacher to touch me anywhere, especially my head." Jessie did not like the kids touching her or calling her names like cactus or loser. Jessie feels sad when she is called a name. When Jessie is angry, she kicks, hits, spits, and pitches a fit. She doesn't like school at all. Jessie's mommy told her that she was going to get a spanking if she did not behave. Jessie's mommy explained that it is important to keep other people safe, and hurting people is not okay. Jessie still didn't want to obey, so she kicked her mommy. The mommy was sad because the mommy loves Jessie and wants to help her, but Jessie hit her and hurt her feelings. One day, Cleo wanted to show Jessie what it was like, so Cleo spit on Jessie. Cleo kicked at her and bumped into her. Jessie learns she needs to obey, and it is not nice to be mean. She asked God to help her have self-control. Jessie learned it does not feel good to be hit or spit on. The mommy also explained to Cleo it is not her job to teach Jessie lessons. Jessie's mom prayed with her and thanked God for her. Jessie learned about self-control and to ask for forgiveness when she hurt someone. The end.